I was here from the NCI, and I just want to set some remarks he said to me and us. He sees a lot of enthusiasm here. He sees a lot of energy here. He sees a lot of things going on in this campus. And we don't need lots of money to get where we're going, but we're raising the bar at this cancer center to seek an NCI designation. And that means a lot of different things, but it raises the bar about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And one of the things he told me, because we talked about some of these different things, and he's a colleague I've known for a while, we must, since the day we've been here, we must figure out ways to work with one another because collaborative science is much more productive than individual science. And that's, in a nutshell, our salvation to grow this center, is to work with everyone, not only in the health sciences campus, but across this university, across this region, in this state. If we do that, we will be that much more successful. And we don't need hundreds of millions of dollars of research funding to compete with Johns Hopkins or MD Anderson and so forth. But what we do have is we have each other, and you cannot underestimate the power of collaborations and how they look at it. They look at grants, who's co-leaders on a grant. They look at publications. They look at numbers of authors. They count authors, who's publishing with whom, inter- and intra-programmatic collaborations. So he says, not only is it hard to get the funding, and you're going to hear some stories, we hope to hear some stories about the importance of that, but the harder part, and I've challenged everyone, we have to ask ourselves what it is we're doing here today that's going to affect us getting where we want to go. And we must figure out ways to do our science together. So Chris is going to orient us to how we're thinking we're going to go forward, or we'd like to go forward,
Absolutely.
And then we'll get going.
Well, think about it. Collaboration, multidisciplinary approaches. What better platform do we have to do this than a land-grant university? Where we bring together teaching, we bring together research, we bring together engagement or outreach. What better platform do we have to do this than a state like West Virginia? A state where, for me at least, coming into this room, it's fun to see familiar faces and people that I've met before. Why should Scott and I be nervous? We're amongst friends. We're amongst colleagues. We're amongst professionals, experts, people who all have a passion for this. In so many ways, what we want to do today is we want to talk about the needs that we have plus the opportunities. We want to understand that the research enterprise is only a research enterprise if you can translate that research into action, and that it is indeed multidisciplinary. We want to get an idea of how people do their research, what inspires you to do the research. We also want to take a holistic approach and understand that research is only as good as its application. It's only as good as how sustained it might be. We also understand that cancer research is not only that which is basic science or takes place at the bench or for the clinician. It's also population-based. It's public health. It's understanding prevention, wellness, health promotion. It's the whole group of individuals working together. Now, I hope you all will just indulge me for 1 second. I want to tell you a quick story. Because at the end of the day, we are all teachers, right, Scott?
Yep.
Okay. I had a telephone call with one of my students today. She's an intern. She's an intern at the Babb Randolph Cancer Center. Okay. And she's been working with breast and cervical cancer education. Her name is Samantha. And she's getting her master's degree in public administration. Okay. She's going to be one of these folks who goes out and helps to promote awareness of programs. She's going to be one of those folks who helps make things happen for others, to manage. And she had a small role to play in some of the planning for Bonnie's bus. Okay? She went out across the state and she did some focus group discussions. She helped. She assisted, as she told me. She said that she went to places like Welch, and she went to places like Blacksville, Brooke County, Martinsburg, across the state. These were places that she had not been to before, and she learned more about West Virginia. She said that when she was doing the focus group, she realized how important it was to connect with the people who we ultimately serve. I got to tell you, as a professor, I just love that. And she said that being able to be involved in connecting with folks outside of the office also gave her a sense of meaningfulness, that this was meaningful to her. And I think all of you in health sciences should be very proud of that you make those opportunities for students. So when we think about our efforts today and we think about the discussion, I invite us to think about a few things. One is to set the general context. Where have we been and where are we going? The second is more detailed and perhaps more personal. Why is this area of research important to you? What inspires you? What motivates you? And perhaps most importantly, what sustains you over time? How do you approach this as a sense of vocation? The third is, I think we should talk a little bit about West Virginia and just how relevant the research and the efforts here at West Virginia University are to our state. And finally, as we always like to do, we should think about the future and pull it all together. And so, Scott, why don't we go ahead and get started with some questions? And why don't we think about I'm going to put the question to you first, and then you can throw it out. How has cancer research changed? And what's 24 years now with the Gala? So, how about that? How about in the past quarter century? Where have we been?
Let's start with what you prefaced in the very beginning, like starting at Bonnie's Bus and population research. 24 years ago, there was no conception of what population research was or what prevention was. And one of the things that really attracted me looking at this institution, that is the hardest piece to grow in a cancer center. And it's one of the pieces here that has the most solid foundation. Reaching out, figuring out how we can, as Peter had said, education is a very important part of a cancer center. Educating the public about what they should and should not do. Screening, treatments, warning signs, preventions, risk factors, genetic issues for families. And working with Pamela Brown's group and Stephanie Kennedy, looking at how we're trying to structure Bonnie's Bus to reach out. And then there's that service and prevention angle that does have a research mission. Then there's a whole other area of population research that to be honest with you, when I didn't know anything, don't know anything about it. And that's community-based participatory research. And colleagues in our Cancer Center and Prevention Research Center, you need to know that the CDC has funded, how many years has this PRC's been funded now, Jerry?
The first three PRCs were funded in 1984.
1984, so the PRCs have been at it for about 25 years. And a program that grew out of our PRC is the NOT program, Not on Tobacco, which is now listed on the NIH website that Kim Horn and Jerry have helped author as an evidence-based approach to help teenagers stop smoking with a success rate of 15 to 20%. And more than that, this is perhaps the first, as I understand it, the first, after 25 years, community participatory-based research endeavor that landed on an NIH website that became the signature program for prevention that the American Lung Association has adopted. And you know what's the neatest thing about it? It has a Morgantown address, I think. So I don't know what community-based participatory research is. So how's that as a question to start with? Kim, tell me.
And before we start, I got to play technician here for a second. As you all know, this is being webcast, and we need a microphone for you. So Kim, here's a microphone. Kayla, hey Kayla, how are you? Good. Kayla's providing a lot of help for us today, and you're not going to hear yourself on any. Yeah, it's just going to be like that. There's no PA system. That's just to go into the web. So
community-based participatory research, we call CBPR. That's our term mostly in the office. But CBPR is a kind of research that is for people and with people and not on people or to people. It's about gauging people in our community, the people for whom our research is intended to serve and make an impact on their health. It's about engaging them in every phase of the research so that in the end, that research, whatever we produce, our findings, our products, our tools, whatever it is that comes from our research, has the biggest impact, has the potential for the greatest impact on their health and their well-being. And it does so because they've had an opportunity to help us shape the research questions. They've had a chance to help us understand what their needs are, what the issues are in their communities and in their families and in their lives. So often, traditionally researchers have done research in sort of an ivory tower. And we know that. We've all heard about that kind of research. A lot of times that research gets lost. It sits on a shelf somewhere, or it stops in the lab. And it doesn't go any further into the community to affect people's lives every day. And I think that people here, in particular, are very good about reaching into the community and listening to community needs, not just at the level of research, but I saw that this morning in the cancer stories too, how much and how the impact that our providers have had on people's lives, and there was a clear channel of communication back and forth about what people need and what's important to them. That's a fundamental basis of how we do research, I think, particularly in population health research, because it has the potential to make an impact. And I think that's very important here in West Virginia, where we've had underserved populations, where there's been a history of resource exploitation, where people's voices weren't heard. And that's changing. And I think that through our Cancer Center and the work that we're doing, that we're having a greater impact. And I look at the Not on Tobacco program, and the program is where it is today because we listened to the voices of people in this state. This state, people came to us and said, we have a terrible problem with teen smoking. We need to help people stop, and we need to find ways. So we worked with our community to engage them. We ended up with a tool that not only worked in West Virginia, but it's had an impact on the rest of the nation.
I want to interject because I'm going to do this as we go along. A thought just came to my eyes. I'm going to pretend I'm a site visitor for an NCI grant application. West Virginia has, I think on our scorecard, anybody's scorecard, has the second highest consumption of cigarette smoke in the country. And they're leaders in the tobacco research, the T2R2 we call it, Translational Tobacco Reduction Research Program. We're dealing now, we're looking at snus, the roles of tobacco, and people are saying, well, that's not the same thing as smoking. That has huge health implications. But here we are at a state that has the second highest consumption of tobacco. And we have a ready-made program to address a health disparity, to help address the tobacco program. And you look now at NIH websites, a high priority, one of the highest priorities now in their agendas, are trying to figure out strategies to deal with tobacco-related illness. And this cancer center, this prevention research center, and this university is as poised as anybody to begin to lead some of those efforts. So there's a nice, I'm going to interject those to make some sense about where we want to go and how we get there. But here's a health disparity, a problem, and a public response in a cancer center. And I'm going to take one other liberty to also orient you to another grant that the NIH is coming out. We're going to try to put that together. It's no longer good enough to just think about one aspect of any kind of scientific clinical population problem. NIH is now forcing us, because if you want to get money, you got to play by their rules. They're asking you the broad concept, Jerry handed me this paper, cells to society. So we're in the process in the Cancer Center of trying to respond to a P50 grant, health disparities, cells to society. What is the fundamental mechanism of cancer? What causes the cancer? What's the basic science of a change, or a change that makes a DNA change, that creates a signal that makes a cell survive, that we heard at Mike Rupert's lecture yesterday, the characteristics of a cancer cell? All right, now you got the cell that affects different organs, and there are other pathways that are involved. And now you have a tumor in a patient, and that patient interacts with a family, as you said at the very beginning. And the patient is in a home. The patient is in a community. What else is in the community that causes cancer? Cigarette smoke, heavy metals in the water, in the air, pollution, things that they're asking us to begin to look at. And why? The simple observation is, I won't tell any, the simple truth is, smoking is one of the leading causes of cancer. But the ironic thing is, that a lot of people that smoke don't get cancer. In a lot of people, there's an epidemic, particularly of adenocarcinoma, in women that don't smoke. So there are other issues just beyond tobacco. And they're asking us, cells to society, what's the fundamental issue that's causing the cancer in that patient, in their home? Does the policymakers, does the community need to know to do something different? And if they do we empower our policymakers or legislature to make the change to deal with the problem that you're spanning the spectrum from cells to society? This is why a cancer center is so fun, because in this room we got everybody. Students, scientists, clinicians, population scientists, prevention folks. This is the fun of trying to play together. But this is what the NIH is asking us. So that's another angle of community-based participatory research. And I want to keep on the prevention theme with Bonnie's Bus and with all the education you do. What can you tell us, Pamela? Because that's a little different what you do from participatory research.
I'd like to take a step back a little bit in our discussion, back to where we were talking about what is it exactly that needs to happen to reduce some of the disparities in our state. And I remember when I came here in 1987 and first started with the Cancer Center, which of course at that time wasn't actually a center. Excuse me. I remember very early on in the job, I received some information from the National Cancer Institute, and they wanted our program to go out into our state and talk about this important message. And the message was that they wanted to increase fruits and vegetables and decrease smoking and a whole bunch of other stuff, okay? So the communications that came out said, tell your people to go out and jog, and when you're done, come in and have a high-fiber muffin, okay? Now, this might work in this room, okay, but it didn't work in Welch or Webster County or many places in West Virginia, because telling someone to go out and after their morning jog have a high-fiber muffin didn't equate to the day-to-day living in rural West Virginia. So what we've tried to do over the years is to modify those messages, to look at not only those cultural aspects of the message, but also look at how we can say things in simpler terms, in clearer terms, so that we're not misunderstood. We can go on for a long time talking about things in acronyms and gobbledygook that really doesn't mean a whole lot to people, but what we really need to do is to be talking at a 5th or 6th or 7th grade reading level to make sure that what we're saying, the important messages that we're delivering, can be understood. So a lot of what we do is a translational function of translating what goes on in science in a way that the community can embrace. And then, as Kim said, talking to the community about, okay, we realize that this is not compatible with your culture. What do we need it to do to make it compatible? Some of the preparation that went into our launch of Bonnie's Bus.
Thank you. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of working with Samantha on the focus groups around the state, and I would like to say it's a privilege when we can work with students in that manner. But as we were getting ready to launch Bonnie's Bus, one of the things that we're looking at is having a research component along with the screening component of the bus. And many of us sat in a room and developed this lengthy health questionnaire, and we tossed around the ideas. Is the reading level too high? Is it too long? How long is it going to take? Are women in our state going to be receptive? And when you get a group of people in a room, you know how that is. There's quite a bit of, talk and I would say some arguing about those concepts. And finally, I said to them, why don't we do what we do best, and that is take it to the people who are going to be the consumer. And so yesterday I had the honor of doing key informant interviews with the women who were served on the bus. And we field tested those materials. And much to my surprise, I shared some of the results earlier today, but much to my surprise, 7 of 8 of the women that we asked to participate chose to participate. 6 of 7 said the forms were not too long. They did tell us some of the language was a little bit outside their comfort realm. And so early next week, we're going to get together, we're going to go in, we're going to do some forms revision, and we're going to submit those forms, and that's the way we do business at the Cancer Center. That's the way we incorporate the perceptions of the public into what we do every day.
Think about what we've been talking about. We've been sort of setting the stage. We've been talking about context. There's the old phrase, context is everything. Well, it is. And with time, context changes. We become more aware of that it's not only about doing the research, it's understanding the context, the practice, where things will be applied. It's not only about trying to treat the disease, obviously, but also trying to understand its causes. It's not only understanding the disease in a vacuum, but understanding the person involved and what sort of agency an individual has in making choices for their lives and making informed choices. Scott, I'm going to be presumptuous, but I would think that one of the things that we've learned over the last quarter of century or so in cancer research is just truly how broad and interdisciplinary it is. And that it is linked with research, it is linked with treatment, it is linked with prevention, it is linked with communication and feedback. It's also contextual. We understand that in order to conduct cancer research, in order to conduct the research and explore and to push the boundaries of knowledge and discovery, not only to discover the causes and to treat the disease, but also to engage our fellow citizens, our fellow individuals in its treatment and prevention, that we have to have our own context, we have to have our own capacity here in the university. And as Scott and I were preparing for today's discussion, we really wanted to also get to the question of, at the end of the day, it's individuals who have that passion, right, Pamela? Who have that passion to make something happen. And what is it that motivates, what is it that inspires individuals to engage in the very hard work that's involved in research in all of its many dimensions? And so, if it's okay with you, Scott, I think maybe we'll switch to that theme.
Yeah.
Okay? And I just want to put the question out. Who's a researcher? Raise your hand. Everyone raises their hand, right? Okay, we're all researchers in a way. But I want to put the question out to you all. And please, someone volunteer, because I hate to call on people, okay? But I will do it. Oh, yeah, okay. But what inspires you to do research? Muhammad? What inspires you? Daniel? Anyone?
I can.
Please.
Well, I guess, the truthful answer is it's because my boss tells me to do so. and it's part of the requirement for my fellowship. But once you start to do it, you realize that it's not, we take a lot of things for granted. We do a lot of things in medicine because we think that that's the right way. It's true. This is 100% true. But when you read research, when you look at other people's research, you realize that a lot of it is relative. And, that's not completely a scientific way, but that's what it should be, We do research because we need to get to the scientific way of it. We need to do things that are actually effective, that actually work. So, I think that's what should drive most research. It's to improve things, to do things the right way, because it works.
Good. Great.
I'll share my own personal story in terms of, I'm a medical oncologist. I'm a cancer doctor. And I sorted that out really quickly, that's part of what I want to do in caring for patients. And then I also became an AIDS doctor. So between AIDS and cancer and a double whammy of AIDS and cancer, you are exposed as a clinician to so many things that are unnatural, horrible stories. And we saw survivors today. But you get exposed to people with horrible diseases, pain problems, life-threatening problems, physical debilities, and for no rhyme or reason, somebody will survive 2 days and another person will survive 6 months and somebody will survive 6 years or be cured, and that person might be a wife, a mother, a husband, a father, an aunt, an uncle, you name it. I can't do that every day of my life and enjoy being a cancer physician. You need an outlet. And my outlet is in academics, teaching, writing, and for me, clinical research. So that's my outlet. I love cancer medicine. And oncologists have to know a lot of medicine. A lot of medicine. Not just cancer medicine, but a lot of other medicine. And the interactions with patients and families are very special. But at the end of the day, it can be very, very demanding. And I think the lifespan of an oncologist in private practice is on the order of 7 years. Think about that. So my outlet is being here, being at a university, and trying to do clinical research.
Right. And bridging it together.
And bridging it together.
It's almost, we talk a lot about multidisciplinary approaches. We talk about multiple contexts, but oftentimes we can bring it together in the work that we do. Mohammed, I've got to ask your boss, what inspires you to do research?
I think Scott put it really nice way. I don't know if I can add anything more. The reason I took oncology is because of my aunt who had ovarian cancer and she died from the disease. Mm-hmm. So when you deal every day with diseases like that, when you know that the chance of that person surviving is less than 20% or 60%, so you are actually dealing with imperfections every day. And if you think you can accept that as a norm, then you don't have to do anything. Right. I don't think, as intelligent people, I don't think we can accept that as the standard, gold standard. So as an oncologist, it's almost second nature. I don't think I can do anything other than research. I need to find a better treatment. Who is going to walk into my room the next day? Right. So I can tell the next patient, we have a better treatment. And I'm not as experienced as Scott and many of the people here, but even within 7 years of as a practicing oncologist, I've been seeing that in my clinic. I can tell the next patient, because of what happened with thousands of patients who ended in a clinical trial, this treatment is better. So that's so powerful. And in the clinic, luckily, again, I'm sure we'll talk more, we are part of that process. Yes. We are putting patients on clinical trials, and many of my colleagues are here. They're all being part of this process.
Well, I think that's very well put. And I think that in many ways, one of the things we recognize is that advances are often incremental, right? Piecemeal. In fact, one of the things that you and I were talking about in preparation for today's session was, not only what inspires you, but who inspired you. Okay? We have some students in the room, right? Yes, I'm going to call you all out because we met, right? Laura, tell us what you're doing and why research interests you, and what's inspired you. Might be a person, it might be an experience.
Well, unfortunately, when I was doing my undergraduate degree in California, when I was 21 years old, my father passed away from cancer. And like all of you guys have discussed, that's something that just doesn't make any sense in any way, and is a very emotional process. I was getting my undergraduate degree in biology, and now I'm a fifth-year researcher in the Cancer Center in Scott Weed's lab. And we look at head and neck cancers. And the nice thing about doing research and the nice thing about science is, if you do it right and you can keep emotions out of it, it makes sense. Right. Unlike the disease itself and when it affects you personally, it can't make sense. But when you get your data and you look at it and you put it all together, you have an answer. And, for that one small moment. And hopefully, eventually, it'll just go full circle. And even though you couldn't help that one person in your life, hopefully, your small piece of data will help somebody else and their family.
We really do build, don't we? It's one piece at a time. Jason, you and I were chatting a while ago. What inspires you?
I guess, honestly, what first got me into the field I've chosen is the science itself. I just find it intriguing. I mean, you're diving into the unknown. And I know sometimes it can be hard, and you lose sight of the bigger picture of things and the heartbreaks, the failed experiments, and the hours doing Lord knows what to try to graduate. But, but looking back, looking at the big picture, in all reality, what we do at the end of the day could potentially help save lives, or at the very least give people more time on the earth to spend with their family.
Right.
And that's like I said, it's easy to lose sight of that, but that's the way I feel about how our work could provide an impact.
I think that's very well put, too.
I'm Stephen Tanner. I'm a graduate of this university, and I opted to live in Morgantown my entire life. I'm 84 years old. My primary physician is Dr. Gott. If you don't know who he is, look at the funny pages on the Now, he tells everybody who complains about his primary physician, well, you ought to see a specialist, preferably at a university med school hospital.
Now, I'm thinking of two things that are running through my head. When you pose the question about what drives the researcher to push and to work like hell to find an answer to something, and you've got great answers. But it's also collective, and there is a collective thing that can happen at a university and at a cancer research center, a comprehensive cancer center. And the point that I really want to make, Scott, and it goes back to something that you said when we started the discussion, is we are working, and we will get there, to get the designation that we want. And you made a comment about resources and money, and I personally, I only care about the resource to get the job done, and I think you'd all agree with me on that. There are lots of very good cancer centers around the country, and there are a lot of great universities. And I won't name names, but I could say, you can put X amount of money into them, and the yield and the additional advantage that you will get will be often minimal, because they're already pretty good, and they do good stuff. You take a place like West Virginia University, and I could mention a couple places that'd be similar to, you really don't have to add a lot to get an incredible return, because people in a setting like this and in a state like this with its particular challenges, we're hungry, and you got to be hungry. And a minimal investment in the cancer center here will yield, in my judgment, and I've been a few places, a huge return. You will get, to use a cliche, a hell of a bang for that buck in terms of education, in terms of research, in terms of finding stuff. And I think it's very important for us to keep that in mind. So it's both the individual motivation and drive and passion and commitment, but you can also have, and I think we have it here, a collective passion, and you will get a hell of a better return here than you will in a lot of other places.
And indeed, the idea of a collective action, the idea of coming together and having synergy and collaborating, being multidisciplinary, working across campus, is the fact that you can bring to bear a lot of the resources that you already have here at West Virginia University to make a difference. Then it also demonstrates to others your capacity, and it encourages others to invest in you. Correct. And the idea is the value added, right? What is the value added of us coming together? Not only does it strengthen us internally, but it strengthens us as we seek to work with others. We have with us folks who do research, folks who practice medicine, students who are on the cusp of unbelievable careers. We also have with us those who make certain that collaboration and the collective effort just doesn't happen, but that they actually help to facilitate this. And I'm going to call out a couple people, and I hope you don't mind, Fred and Kurt. Okay? But Fred, I know that you're very dedicated to the education of students and helping to create the framework. How do you approach this? How do you think about the role of students in programming and helping to folks achieve these goals that they want to achieve?
Well, the students, we have students over here, PhD students, we have MD, PhD students, we also have postdoctoral fellows here. And they're basically the building blocks of research in any laboratory. Before I try to answer your question, one thing I wanted to say was, please. I think if you would talk to most investigators, most researchers in the country, and I have queried a number of them, and one of the most satisfying things that they do is to mentor students. It is really enjoyable to watch a student, I don't like the word mature, but I'll say it here, watch them mature from a fledgling first or second year student into a really accomplished senior student. It's one of the most fulfilling, satisfying things I think most researchers, and Laura mentioned this just a minute ago, and that is that we're you know it's just satisfying to see them grow and mature, because they're the ones that are going to maybe make the discovery. A lot of us work very hard over the years, and we probably haven't really accomplished a lot. But what we've done is we've trained young minds, and those young minds may be the ones that'll succeed, or they may train some young minds. Somewhere in the chain, somebody's going to make a discovery that really is meaningful, and everybody, every researcher is waiting for that, looking for that, and hoping that'll happen in their group of people that they've mentored. Education. One of the things that I enjoy, I recruit. Basically, it's kind of one of my major jobs is to recruit students, and we're looking for students who are passionate. If you're not passionate about this, obviously you find something you are passionate about. We're looking for people who are curious, who are exciting, who come to interviews and really project and say, this is really what I want to do. A lot of them come a little starry-eyed and say, oh, I want to cure cancer, and you kind of say, okay, fine, yeah, sure. But they have that passion, that enthusiasm, and that's what we're looking for. We try in our educational endeavors to try to stay contemporary, to try to bring in new things. Scott's the director of the cancer program. He tries to get the students together. Actually, the cancer group, I oversee all the graduate programs at the health sciences, and I would say, although I'm learning about some of the new ones since it's a new job description for me, I would say in the biomedical sciences, the cancer group, the students, the postdoc fellows, as well as the faculty, are probably the closest knit group. They get together, they challenge each other, they have their own seminars, their own seminar series.
It's very much like a team, isn't it?
And it's a team, and they challenge each other, and it's peer pressure and peer criticism in a nice way. Peer challenge is really the secret. It's probably a lot more rewarding for a student than coming necessarily from the top, from the mentor, et cetera.
Absolutely. And I think that reinforcement is crucial. And again, you're building culture, aren't you? You're building a sense of culture. Kurt, I invite you to talk about the research enterprise and some of the infrastructure that's necessary for us to take it to the next level.
Thank you. It's very interesting to listen to all of the researchers and the students speak today, and we could use the Cancer Center as an example of what we're trying to do at WVU at the present time in terms of building the research enterprise, because what we're trying to do is build interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary clusters of faculty and students and postdocs, the whole range of professional experience here to solve really complex and vexing societal problems. And cancer is right up there at the top. As long as all of us can remember, we recall that cancer has been a very serious disease that has brought a lot of emotional stress and pain to all of us, either individually or personally because of family members and others that we knew that suffered from this disease. It's a very complex disease, and yet it's peculiar in the sense that it causes cells to rather de-differentiate rather than to differentiate. And in that sense, it's fundamental cell and molecular biology that has to be understood here. And for that reason, you have to bring together a whole host of individuals with many different experiences and professional training: chemists, molecular biologists, cellular biologists, physicists, biophysicists, and clinicians, and the list could go on and on. and they all have to work together to solve a very difficult problem. This is what makes my job so interesting, in my opinion. Every day, individuals come to me and they either have the next best idea that they need support for, or they have the next best idea that is surely going to be the next Gatorade, or whatever you'd like to say. And what stimulates me is figuring out and finding ways to help support them.
And so in many ways what you do is, with the research office, you're really trying to help to facilitate, aren't you?
Absolutely.
And kind of recognizing that ideas emanate from many different areas, and you're trying to pull people together to be the collective.
That's exactly what we try to do, and we do that. It's both top-down driven and bottoms-up driven. In other words, we do it from the top down. We encourage certain areas within the university to expand and to develop, and sometimes it comes from the faculty themselves. It's a grassroots effort.
Sure.
The WV Nano Initiative is a bottoms-up, faculty, grassroots-driven initiative. The Advanced Energy Initiative is more of a top-down. We already have 100 faculty working on campus in the area of energy, and now we're saying we want to make that a core area of emphasis in terms of interdisciplinary research.
And if we think about it, we can think about it not only in the direction where the encouragement is coming, but we also can think about this as being opportunity-driven and problem-driven.
Yes.
And I think all the research enterprise has that. If you think about our own state, we think about the many opportunities that we have, but we also think about the many challenges that we have. I don't think people find themselves in West Virginia by accident. I think they come here by design. And I think, and I can say that because I'm from Washington, D.C., okay? And I think people who live in West Virginia have such a special pride in our state. And whether they're within our borders or outside of our borders, they want to contribute. They have a desire to see the benefits. Scott, you and I were talking a bit about the challenges that our state faces and the situation right now with our state in terms of incidence of cancer, our health profile. Would you mind giving us just a quick briefing on that? Because I'd like to sort of change the direction of discussion just a little bit about what are some of our future needs, not only for West Virginia, but let us remember we do operate on a national and a global stage. What are some of the research imperatives that we have for the future?
So that gets to the disparities. And before I want to pick up on what is this collective discussion, putting my NIH hat on again, we will get reviewed and we will be complimented if the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That will be written in our pink sheets. And that's what gets to what Peter and what folks are, that's very vital. And that's what you have at the university campus. And that is clearly, that gets to what Dr. McGraw was saying. That's the impact here to here with just a little bit of investment, because there are a lot of strengths that are here. We need to keep growing. And the other piece is institutional commitment. There's a paragraph in the grant about institutional commitment. And today with the ribbon cutting, that's a display of institutional commitment. The new facility, the $90 million. And another thing that struck me coming here is the philanthropic opportunities that have been a legacy at this cancer center. That gets written in our grant. Now, the health disparities, the scorecard, we already talked about smoking. Again, depending on whose scorecard, this is the second or highest obesity rate in the country. For the past 50 years has probably had the highest prevalence of a virus, human papillomavirus, HPV virus, that causes cervical cancer, and beginning to learn more and more. There's some seminal studies that Scott and Ramin Al-Taha and our pathologists that HPV is likely implicated now in a variety of head and neck cancers. The thing that was most striking to me when I started looking at some of these scorecard issues, this state is the oldest median age in the country. The median age of residents of this state is 38.9 years of age. And guess what? Cancer is basically a disease of aging. And you You have the cancer soup, all the ingredients are there. Why we have such cancer burdens. So with the smoking, tobacco, obesity, aging, we see an HPV infection, lung cancer, head and neck cancer. There's a lot of ovarian GYN malignancies that we see. We see all sorts of cancers. All told, breast cancer is, all told, cancers are not necessarily seeing increased incidence, some select ones in this state. But the cancer mortality in this state is the 4th highest in the country. 4th highest in the country. And it also gets back to another thing we kind of looked at, digesting opportunities at this state. This state is very well cataloged, thanks to people like Chris and Pamela and lots of everything. We know the denominator. And again, getting back to Bonnie's bus for health disparities, we know as we stand here today, and there's not a state in the country you could do this. Well, I'll say one exception, maybe North Dakota. I don't know. I haven't looked up their data. But we know that there are 324 women on average, say 320 women, that die of breast cancer in this state annually. And there's some counties in this state that have amongst the highest mortality in the country. And I suspect in 5 or 6 years, it gets back to why we're taking our time to set up these different surveys, to be able to look at the bus and the patients that access the bus and the women we're going to screen, that in 5 or 6 years' time, well, all of a sudden we might see the state numbers change a little bit. And that's the beauty of being in a small state that's very well cataloged, because we have access to data. You couldn't catalog that in New York City and see the impact of something you brought into an institution. So there are very significant health disparities, and many of those are national health disparities as well, but they're unique. They're amplified, some of those here in West Virginia. And that's another part of a strategy to grow our center, because that's what we can be evaluated on. If we develop our programs aligned to the needs of the patients that we see in this state.
Right. So the university is well positioned, isn't it?
Yes.
It is. And we think about the needs, but I'd like to put the question out to everybody in the audience as well. What are some of the needs that you see in our state? Scott's given an overview, but Jamie? Thanks.
This state has the incredible opportunity because of its size and because of the infrastructure in the state. There's an incredible need to educate our communities. And the research that is done in education is around the effectiveness, the methods. We've heard a little bit about gearing your education to the right level that is understandable and appreciated in the particular communities you're in. Scott and I are working on a project, a proposal, looking at clinical trials and the lack of understanding of clinical trials in the communities. Now, the patients that we're finding out want to know about clinical trials, but they don't know what they are. Mm-hmm. The physicians don't know enough about clinical trials. So a challenge is the education of future physicians, the students, the medical students, the dental students, the nursing students, the pharmacy students, about clinical trials. So that's what our project's about. So I think there's a large challenge that West Virginia University can rise to the occasion and meet with respect to educating our future health professions of, for example, clinical trials in cancer that can provide tremendous benefits and much more options to the current treatment regimens of cancer.
I'm going to take this opportunity, Jamie, I'm still going to ask you a question real quick. How long do clinical trials usually last? I mean, I want to use this opportunity actually to learn about this.
Well, Scott's the expert in clinical trials, but you've put me on the spot
Sorry,
here.
Jamie,
But actually, there was a very interesting presentation this week on clinical trials, is that the typical clinical trial takes a very long time to kind of work through the system before the protocol gets accepted. But Scott brought in, and I can't, Dr. Dolman, that talked about upfront small trials that can have a huge impact to shorten the time. So when you're focusing on your clinical trials, you can go right to what you need to focus on.
So one of the things we need to appreciate is the variety of approaches we can use in clinical trials.
Absolutely. And I think education, as in many other fields, is the key. So I'm a strong supporter that institutions should be doing all that they can to not accept the status quo of how we do things, but to always push and look for new and better ways to do it. And certainly education is a field that is happening and needs to continue to happen in.
Excellent, excellent. Jerry?
There are a couple of things
hang on one
that
second.
we hear regularly from folks in the state about if they had recommendations to the research community, what would they recommend? And there are two things that come to mind. The first is don't silo your research, particularly at the population health level. If you look at cancer, the major diseases in our state, tobacco use, physical activity, poor nutrition, they go together. People who, for instance, in adolescence, for instance, teens who smoke, they're also likely to be physically inactive and have poor nutrition. That the things that help you, the things that protect health in terms of cardiovascular health are the same things that protect health in terms of cancer, and diabetes prevention. So work together. In addition to being multidisciplinary, be collaborative when you don't have smoking here and physical activity here and obesity over here. Work together. In fact, there's research now that's linking smoking with diabetes and breast cancer. Okay? So work together. The second thing that we hear a lot of is the lack of attention on mental health and its critical importance in the state, whether it be for cardiovascular health, for cancer. Mental health in West Virginia ranks 50th in the nation in terms of life satisfaction. That has an enormous impact on physical health. We can't separate. People are body, mind, and spirit. If you look at the likelihood of, say, getting screening, that's going to be impacted by your mental health. Smoking, poor diet, lack of physical activity, they all go together. Once you've been diagnosed with cancer, your mental health status will impact your prognosis and your survival time. So when they talk to us, they don't forget about the importance of hope, the importance of social support, and those factors within communities and within families that bring people together and give them hope, that will affect them physically, not only psychologically, but physically as well.
Yes. Linda. Thanks, Kate.
I'd also like to speak to the importance of the university as a catalyst in a state that speaks about limited resources. Our ability to reach out into our state and to work with many of the professionals that are in our communities that can be empowered to do even more than they are already doing at their community level. One of the projects that I'd like to bring to your attention is a collaboration between Cancer Prevention and Control, the Appalachia Community Cancer Network, and the WVU School of Pharmacy. We're working together to empower community pharmacists to educate their patients about the importance of colorectal cancer screening. 500 West Virginians die every year because they haven't been screened for colon cancer. And it's very, very important that we get our screening rates up high. We know that pharmacists, community pharmacists, are among the most respected health professionals, not only in this state, but across the country. There are so many ways that they can reach out to their communities to help, to educate, and to counsel. And so we've been granted an NCI pilot to experiment and to see whether whether this is really feasible, whether this can actually happen. But the idea of the university as a catalyst, I think, is incredibly important. And I just wanted to share that with you.
That's fantastic, Linda. Thank you. Other thoughts on the opportunities and challenges and conditions in our state? You know, the great thing about a land-grant university like West Virginia University is that we do serve our state. But we also serve the country, and we serve the globe, if you will. The wonderful thing is that a land-grant university is a crossroads for all of that. And we know that a lesson that we might learn in Webster County could be applicable not only nationwide but across the globe. We know that a researcher who comes here from abroad and spends time with us, makes a career here, can make a difference in the lives of West Virginians. And so we're also a catalyst, or we're also a crossroads, I guess, aren't we? Which is a very nice thing to think about in terms of the resource and asset that we have. Let's think about West Virginia University on this national and global stage. We are all here together because of our common interests. Fortunately, we don't have walls built around us. We may get those pink slips, but we know that it's because we have colleagues who care just as much as we do elsewhere. We know that we have resources within the university to draw upon and within the state to draw upon, but we know we can go outside of our borders as well. Federal sources of support and beyond. So I guess I'd like to ask the question, what are the big questions out there? What are the big challenges out there right now for cancer research? At the national level, global level, what are the big driving issues? I think the students in particular have given us some wonderful insight on the step-by-step process that you need to take. I think the students have also given us wonderful insight on the essence of curiosity and that spirit of discovery that keeps you going. So, I think the students really should answer this question first. And that is, what are the big questions out there? Heather, what are the big questions out there?
I think one of the big things that you hear about at the national meetings as far as cancer research goes and the international meetings is everyone wants to look at mechanistic pathways to have more targeted personal patient care. And it seems like, you have a population of patients, some of them are resistant, some of them respond, and now everyone's trying to really get down to the mechanisms of these drugs, how they work, and how we can make them better on an individual basis so that you can screen patients initially and find out who is or is not going to respond to a drug to get them on the correct therapy a little faster. Great. So it's basic science all the way up to treating the patients.
Fascinating.
Bingo. Now, I want to interrupt here.
Go ahead.
This is just spectacular. Because we're at a university and a cancer center, and our resources are challenged, a colleague in the cancer center, Landau, invited a very recognized senior investigator from the Moffitt Cancer Center in Florida. And Moffitt is a cancer center that just has exploded over the past couple of years. One of my former mentors, he's moved on a couple different places. But this guy came to our cancer seminar series. And Merck plopped $100 million in that institute to begin to develop this genetic profile repository of tumors. And because we met with him, and Lan and I were in our office, went to his seminar, he's building a network. Now, our cancer center does not have the resources to take everybody's tumor and do genetic profiling on it. But we can do one thing, is that we can make sure that every patient that comes into our door, we're going to get a sample of their tumor, we're going to work with our pathologists, and we may have the opportunity to collaborate with them to send them the sample to Moffitt, and they're getting the funding to do all the genetic profiling of the tumors that we heard with some of the talks we had this week. And that this is in a national bank, kind of. Now a pharmaceutical company goes to Merck because they have a new drug because of a mechanism you just talked about, and I'll give you the one that has just been approved, KRAS oncogene and its impact in colon cancer. They might have this target, they go to their bank, they look at how many patients they have in their bank that have this protein or this gene, and they see, well, West Virginia has 5. And they're going to send us a report, we're going to have a trial, and we will be able to hopefully begin to deliver personalized medicine. Now, could we replicate that on our own here? No. But that's clearly, cancer is probably a little bit further along than most entities in medicine right now. But you're hearing a lot about personalized medicine. But we want to bring the world to Morgantown. That's what we can do. I thought this was a great idea, and Lan and I were just goo-goo gaga when we were talking to him. So we've now signed we've gotten the paperwork, a confidentiality disclosure agreement, to begin to work to see if we can qualify to participate in this program, and it's going to be my job to figure out how to work with pathologists. We have a wonderful tumor bank here, and we're trying to figure out how to interact with that. Doesn't have all the resources, and right now, breast cancer is a challenge right now for tumor banks because, as I'm learning, and Jane can tell us, women get these fine needle biopsies, and by the time they're done with the biopsies, there's nothing left. So there's actually a scarcity now across national tumor banks of breast cancer because of our abilities to detect early or diagnose women earlier. But now we're challenged because now we have all these pathways that you pick out. But what could be better that we could advertise as soon as we're working on this protocol, that every patient that comes into our door, we're asking to collect a blood sample and permission to send get a tissue sample, and we're going to try to work with this cancer center to see if we can get a sample down in Moffitt that's in this big bank, because they have access to hundreds of millions of dollars through a pharmaceutical sponsorship. They're seeking grants. They have the whole state of Florida covered. They got about 13, 14 centers, some small. We're in the process. I hope we can deliver on that. But you nailed it, perfect. Absolutely nailed it. Cancer medicine is evolving. It's no longer give one drug to make your hair fall out, as we heard, or get sores in your mouth or lower your blood counts. We got to carve the denominator and give a drug for the 5 or 10% of the patients that it's really going to have an impact on. So that's a huge challenge for the future. And this came up because we invited a speaker to our cancer cell biology seminar series, and he was a good guy, and we evolved and just talked about things. And there might be an opportunity for us to really have an impact for our patients.
And so you get plugged into a national initiative. I love doing this type of facilitation because I learn so much. And to think about target-specific treatment, patient-specific, is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Nicole, what do you think's out there for the future? Big question.
That's a tough act to follow, Nicole.
Yeah, it is. We know that there's plenty out there, though, right? Plenty of opportunities.
I think one of the things out there that we're seeing more and more is chemoresistance. Chemoresistance. A patient comes in with a tumor. They are treated with chemotherapy, and over time they may either develop another tumor that is now resistant to that therapy. So the tumors are able to evolve so that they're no longer responsive to some of the treatments that we have, and I think that's a big challenge that we're going to see in the future.
Absolutely. Scott?
Chemoresistance, how to make therapies more effective, how to overcome strategies that the tumor evades to survive your treatment is very important. I think another challenge is that we're beginning to learn, there's so much crosstalk, there's so much redundancies in how cancer evolves. It's not going to be just the one drug that's going to be magical. I think the other thing is our scientists are exploring, we heard about the central dose, you go from DNA to RNA to protein yesterday, and there's some of our scientists in the Cancer Center that are looking at some things a little bit differently that don't do what we think they do. And Steve, maybe I can pick on you. Caspase-8, for instance, is a protein that is normally thought to cause apoptosis or death, and Steve in his work is looking at caspase-8 in a different way. So part of the challenge and future of science is maybe to re-look at something a little bit differently than what everybody else is looking at. Can you comment here?
Well, sure. Since you asked, I actually have an even more amazing story than that.
I'd like to hear it.
So there's a so-called viral oncogene that's been in literature for decades that's carried by a very common human respiratory virus called human adenovirus. And the gene is called E1A, and some of you may be familiar with it from Mike's talk yesterday. You alluded to that briefly. And
Can you speak up, Steve?
Oh, sorry. So we, like many other labs in the early 80s, were working on the mechanism by which E1A can oncogenically transform rodent cells in culture. And a few years later, I started my own lab at WashU, and we, just by historical accident, turned out to be the first people on Earth probably to express this gene in human tumor cells. And the effect is the exact opposite, actually. So E1A is actually a very broad spectrum tumor suppressor gene in human cells, and we've sort of developed some models to explain how this works mechanistically, and that's really sort of been the major driving force behind everything that we've pretty much done in the last 20 years in our lab.
Your comments bring us back, and we're almost close to the end, but your comments bring us back to the essence of discovery, don't they? Discovery, that all of a sudden there's a recognition, even though there's been, somewhere beyond the horizon we know that this may exist, we're closer to discovery. I think that's what you're conveying to me as a layperson, okay? Discovery, treatment, what to do when treatment doesn't work with chemo-resistant tumors, okay? Understanding the connections of one's health profile, that a person is not a data point, are they? And a university is not a silo, okay? It's the essence of understanding prevention, health promotion, wellness, feedback, communication. Think about what we've talked about today. We've found common ground in many ways. We understand that this university, in and of itself, is this platform. It's a platform in which we can serve the state, we can serve the nation, and beyond. We also understand that through collaborative, collective, coordinated action, we're able to build our own resources to have those synergies that make us even stronger and, frankly, position us better, I believe, to compete nationally and globally for recognition, for resources, and also for us to be in a position to make a difference. We understand that research is not simply about discovery. Research is also about encountering the same problems again and again, but from a different perspective. It's about building incrementally, isn't it? Right, Mohammed? That's what you were talking about, and I love that. It's about taking it to the next step of perfection, knowing, unfortunately, that perfection probably is never quite there. But then that's the opportunity for you all, isn't it? Is to take it to the next step. It's the recognition and the realization that through our own efforts, we realize that the problems that we are identifying, sometimes they're age-old problems, sometimes they're new problems that are brought about by context, sometimes they're new problems that are brought about by our broader understanding of what it is to do research. And we understand, I think from our discussions today, that research in and of itself speaks to a passion inside of us. And yet we have to sort of set that passion aside sometimes and be logical, cold, and rational, right? But we know that that passion, when combined with our skills and our desire, creates a sense of vocation. To me, that's the greatest takeaway. It is people going to their offices at 11, 12, 2 o'clock at night. It is people putting in 8-day weeks, right? It is. And that's what drives us, and that is what sustains us. And so to me, I can tell you that I think that this has been just an unbelievable education for me, to be able to listen and to learn. Scott, I know that one of the things I wanted to ask you to do in wrapping things up is to tell us a little bit about the future, both literally and figuratively. Literally meaning, what do the next couple of days hold, and more metaphorically or figuratively, what does the future hold?
She did so well, I don't want to have to. This has just been thank you everyone for coming. This has just been really terrific. This cancer center in the university, we're poised to do some things. We're not going to do everything, but we really are poised to do some things. And over these past couple days, we've had opportunities to get to know one another a little bit better amongst our immediate peers, amongst our friends, and hopefully more and more throughout the university and the Health Sciences Center. And we have a fun weekend. Tomorrow, I encourage you really will learn about some cutting-edge research that's done on this campus. The speakers tomorrow are all funded, and their work has been funded by federally peer-reviewed sponsors. There is some nice research being done here. And our strengths, I say, are in basic science and population. And part of the attraction, I think, for my candidacy here, we have a great clinical team. We have some gaps,
but we must build our clinical trials portfolio and our clinical research portfolio and provide the opportunities about getting tumor samples to the places that need to be that can help us, because we can't do all these things alone. But we're going to get there. That's what we came here, and there's the opportunity in this state, and the things we have learned is that people in this state are very loyal to this university and to this hospital. And that's something we can take advantage of that, and we will take advantage of that as we grow the center. So we have a fun next couple days, and I can't wait to keep moving forward, and you're going to hear about some really nice, and we span the spectrum of science tomorrow. It's not just, it's cells to society. You know, we actually went society to cells with our discussion today. We talked about cells, but we went that way. And you'll get a flavor of all the things that are going on in this university, and the research you're hearing tomorrow is as good as anywhere else. It's as good as anywhere else. We just got to build up our bench, build up our portfolio, and keep moving forward. So I think I'll leave it at that. And I want to thank everybody. Thank Dr. McGraw for allowing us to come to Brennan House. So this has just been a terrific dialogue with everyone. And Chris, I want to thank you for. Thank you. It was just terrific. So thank you all very much.